You don't look old enough to have been around in San Francisco in 1985. How did you come to make the film?
Because I am old enough. No, I was a teenager dancing in New York City, actually, and I was from LA, so I knew San Francisco. But my dance experiences were in New York, and I was very young, very frightened, and while the older men around us, older at that time being 30 and up, started getting sick, there were a lot of very young dancers, very frightened and very mute. We didn't really have a community. So this kind of reflected that experience.
So, the film came out last year in the States. Oh, actually, maybe just Berlin.
No, we've just done festivals. So it'll be coming out in the States June 6th, in theaters and on VOD, and then around Europe.
But you've had screenings
Yes,
in the US. So, what do the younger generation think about it?
The younger generation. Well, there's lots of interest in the condom issue. I think we take well, I don't know. There was a time when I was very young, and maybe some people in the audience remember, where condoms were a thing of the past. They were just an antiquated relic of sort of absurd. Why did you need them if you had a pill or whatever? So they're interested in that. They didn't know about that. Yeah, mostly the condoms.
And is there a lot of nostalgia? Do people enjoy seeing the 80s? I mean, the music's fabulous. Let's talk about the music as well as nostalgia.
Yeah, it was fun getting the music together. I wrote a lot of the music into the script. The Laurie Anderson was in the script, and I wrote to her early on and told her what we were doing. She's connected to the dance world. She's on various boards of directors for dance companies, or at least one that I know of. And she gave it to me for free, so that was a great beginning. And then some other stuff we couldn't afford, but I had a music supervisor who knew the era, and he made selections of people, for example, Klaus Nomi, who sings the sort of operatic song that you see in that Peeping Tom scene. He later died of AIDS. So the music supervisor, or Romeo Void, 2 songs at the end in the club, are a local San Francisco group, and the lead singer became something of an activist around HIV and AIDS. So he picked songs that, while the audience may not know the resonance or the relevance, it's there. So I think that's a nice layer.
But they're really good. Was the music just in the 80s just better, do you think?
I think so, yes. But it's coming back, I think.
I think it depends how old you are, because there's something about when you walk into a club and you hear those songs that are kind of ingrained on your baby gay brain that you just keep on dancing to the same thing.
For me, it was the Eurythmics, nonstop Eurythmics. Yeah.
No communards.
I couldn't afford them, no. And the communards, sure. Yeah, I had danced at first. That was a first career before I went to school and started doing film. And I picked a choreographer, very talented young woman, Sidra Bell, and we made it all in 2 weeks in San Francisco. And I was sort of there with her as an editor, might be for a book writer, just letting her know what my taste was, or maybe that could jump, or maybe that could be off balance. But she really made it all. It's her work. And I think she did a great job. We pulled it together really fast. Great dancers, several of them in San Francisco Ballet. None of them are actors. I mean, the whole cast is dancers, by the way. Except for Matthew Rich, the sort of swarthy guy who's the second lead. He's an actor. He's done straight plays on Broadway. We call them straight plays in America. I don't know what you call them here. And he is a musical theater dancer, but so he could sort of fake it with the others, but everyone else are sort of legit dancers from real ballet companies or modern companies. So they worked very fast. They all liked each other a lot and just made a really cohesive unit. I cast about in San Francisco for that's where we were shooting, for a dancer who had just an instinct for acting, and Scott did. And then I really workshopped with him for about 6 months, and we sort of rewrote scenes together, and I taught him some acting technique, which he picked up very quickly, and he has gone on to do more acting and take more classes. Yeah, I think the other dancers trusted me because I was a dancer and I knew their world, but with Scott it was a really intensive one-on-one process. Yes, it was a conscious decision. I'm glad you asked because it's an important part of the film. Most AIDS films, if we can use that label, which is a little bit vulgar, but so it goes. Most AIDS films have been deathbed films. You know, I think it's natural when you make a film about drugs, people OD. When you make a film about a deadly disease, people get sick and die. So we had seen those stories, and I think it was important that those stories were told first, for political reasons, for emotional reasons. And this is a story about people who don't get sick, you know, and that story really hadn't been told yet. And at first I thought maybe it wasn't worth telling, you know, who cares if you didn't get sick? But we were there, those of us who didn't get sick. And we were a part of that experience. And I wanted to put that on film. I wanted to tell that story. As for the background use of people who were sick, this is 1985. It was very early. It was San Francisco, and he was in a very small world. So it really exploded more on the streets in 86, 87 in San Francisco. So historically, I could justify it, and for budgetary reasons, I didn't also want to you know, I made, my production budget was like $130,000, you know, and then by the time we were done with post, it was up to about 200. So that's very tiny to do a period piece. So there were, it was creatively designed as a very small and personal story, but also conveniently, for budgetary reasons, it had to be. And I sort of wrote it that way. I raised my money through private equity, some of it, and through grants, some of it, which is very unusual in America. I formed a nonprofit to raise grant money because the film has some educational value, and I can show it to audiences around some of the issues in it. No, the trick is it's period, but the thing is you can't show any cars, and you don't have any money to get what are called picture cars, which are, you know, era appropriate cars. So the trick was just to point the camera up. And when we pointed the camera up, there were lots of buildings. But also I love San Francisco. I love the Victorian architecture. You know, there's a lot of Victorian in London, but it's stone, and in San Francisco it's mostly wood, the first growth redwood that they tore down to build the city in the gold rush mostly. So I love that architecture, and I love showing it. Thank you. Well, you guys are great. I mean, there were laughs at all the places where I hoped there would be laughs, except the phone cord, not so much. Um, but was really wit in the audience and probably in the country. And it was more serious in Germany. I think afterwards, talking to people, I realized they liked it, but they are serious about what they're seeing. And that's all.